data use from a variety of different contexts. This morning someone said this conference is making Africa feel like one village. And we want to take advantage of that while we're all here together and then start a community moving forward of people who care about these issues and people who are working on these issues. So what I'm going to do is call forward my speakers one at a time, and I'm going to keep them to only 5 minutes, and I'm going to be very hardcore about that, so I will rush up and do some sort of dance. And then, again, we will start the conversation really quickly. So please write down your questions. Feel free to tweet out your questions to local data use if that's how you like to ask questions. Thank you. So the first person I'd like to offer up, we are taking shared notes on a Google Doc. So if anybody wants to contribute to the shared notes Google Doc, it also has some starter questions on it. Feel free to go check it out. It's NY87BP on a Google short URL. All right, so first I would like to invite Mr. Mark Arura up, and he's going to tell us in just 5 minutes about the work he does with the Results Data Initiative. At least I will if Mark is here.
Morning, everyone. Morning, everyone. I'm Mark Arura. I work with Development Gateway, and I'll just briefly, in less than 2 minutes, talk about our work around data. So as a community, we are investing a lot in collection and in publishing of data. But one of the things that we are not asking ourselves is, even as we move forward to the 2030 agenda, is and making a lot of investments, billions of investments in data, is, how are we going to actually use this data? How can we connect data to decision making? So we've been working the last year. We went out and had around 500 qualitative interviews in Sri Lanka, in Ghana, here in Ghana, and in Tanzania, and we are asking decision makers, how important is this to you? And what they told us is, data analysis is not my job. I work at a health facility, and my primary role is to provide care. But data analysis is not my job. And there's limited space to innovate. There's limited space to do something outside the box within the structure. And lastly, there were concerns about data quality. Now, through our Results Data Initiative, we have been trying to reach out again and take this conversation forward, try to explore how we can get these people at the subnational level, the people who are working, solving the real problems, if they can exert influence and the data can be made more useful, more meaningful to them. And one of the things that we are doing right now is with the government of Tanzania and Malawi, and also DFID, going back to them in a co-design, co-creative space. We want to have a demand-driven approach to ask ourselves, what matters to you? Can I connect this piece of data, which is the top 10 diseases in my health facility, to a decision? Like, I can order more drugs, or I can deploy more resources, so that we can use data to link data to a demand, to an actual decision. And we have had our first interministerial meeting in Tanzania, and we are looking forward to follow that up in Malawi as well. And our hope is to come up with an approach, a process, and if possible, some tools which can assist these users at the subnational level to link data up to results. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next up is Al Kaggs, and he'll be speaking about his work as a founder of Open Institute and the work that he's been doing, particularly in Kenya, around working with communities and governance.
Good morning. First of all, I want to apologize to the people who are in a session with me yesterday, because I'm going to tell the story that I told yesterday again. It's currently the story that I'm excited by, and when I get excited by something, I talk about it all the time. I'm sure I'm the only person in the room with such characteristics. But the story I want to tell you is how Lanet Umoja got its dispensary. Lanet Umoja location is a small location. Location in Kenya is the smallest administrative region in Kenya. So you take Kenya, you break it down to provinces, you break them down to counties, you break them down to districts, you break them down to divisions, and you break those down to locations, which is the smallest. They're led by a chief. In Lanet Umoja's case, the chief is called Francis Kariuki. He's famously known as the tweeting chief. If you Google the tweeting chief, for those of you who are not from Kenya, you will hear some very interesting stories about him. And the reason he's called that is because he uses Twitter for administration. So he tweets, your car gets stolen, you send an SMS to him, he tweets, everybody in the community gets an SMS that your car has been stolen. You see, your neighbor sees the cow, sends in him an SMS, and car is found. Simple cycle of things, right? So everybody in his community uses Twitter, but they use Twitter via SMS. Anyway, we went to this community and we spent some time with them, and we started talking about the SDGs, and then we started talking about the value of data. And it was interesting for us. Please go to the Open Institute's YouTube channel and see some of the videos, and you'll see some very old people, some of them older than your own grandmother, who are talking about data very authoritatively, albeit in their own languages. And so we talk about data, and we showed them about what data can do and what the SDGs are and so on. And then we got these old community leaders to agree to go house by house and collect data from every single household on everything that affects that community. I'm talking about security, food, health, education, you name it, all the sectors. It's what we were doing was like a mini census. And once they had done that, we then digitized that data, we put it on a dashboard, and we gave it back to them. And we said, look at what your data says. Some of the dashboard we were using the oldest technology in the land, which is paper. And we printed out all these images of what the data says and put them out on the wall. And we had a data fair for the entire community to come and sort of look at the data and talk about it. The one thing that they found to be the highest priority in the community was health. They discovered that yes, water is a big priority, but it's not the highest priority. The other priority that they had was livelihoods, but they discovered it's not as high a priority as health, because they were having a lot of waterborne diseases and other kinds of incidental diseases. So they realized that one of the challenges that they are having in that community is that they had to go out of the location to go and find medical care, and that can be difficult because of the fact that it's a large community. So based on the fact that they figured out what the priority is, and they figured out that the priority was health, they then did a memorandum, which was done by the gender committee of the community. And once they had written that memorandum, they summoned the governor of the county, which is the subnational government that puts budgets on health in their area. And they summoned the governor and they said, listen, Mr. Governor, if you do nothing else, we have elections this year. If you do nothing else before the elections, sort out this one thing. The county government officials pushed back a little bit and tried to say, but we've done so many things in this area, we've done water, they said, no, we're talking about health, focus. If you do nothing else, sort out health. and we need a health center in the community. So what they then did is the governor said, well, we have had money for the last 2 years for a health center. My time is almost up. We have had money for the last 2 years for a health center, but we don't know where to place it. So the community said, fine, we know a place where you can place it. It's an old cattle dip. Do you know what a cattle dip is? Anyone? A cattle dip is this thing where you take cows and you throw them into a bunch of water and you treat them with it. So they said, there's this land where we used to do cattle dip, but we don't use it anymore. Can we convert it into a health center? This was in November of last year. That is the health center, a picture of the health center that was taken last week. Thank you very much. My point is, data works.
And Al, I don't want you to answer this now, but I'll be interested to hear a little bit more and to hear from the other panelists as you're thinking about what Al just said about how data works. What are the mechanisms that really took that, you needed the data, but what made it turn into a health center, And when have you tried to do that and it didn't work out? So my next speaker is going to be Nkechi Okwone. She's the country lead for Code for Nigeria, and she also has extensive experience with the Edo State subnational data portal, which is potentially the world's first subnational data portal. Yeah. So we'll hear about it right now.
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here again, and congratulations to Ghana for hosting this event. Hopefully, Nigeria will pick up from there sometime very soon. I'm going to take just a few minutes to tell you a story. I have a lot of stories. Having worked with the Edo State government in Nigeria for the past 5 years, and then moved over to Code for Africa. A lot of things have happened all this time, but there's one story really close to my heart that I think is going to be very beneficial to everyone here today. So Edo State is one of the 36 states in Nigeria. It's in the southern part of Nigeria. And just last year, we changed governments. Prior to that, we had launched the Open Data Portal September 12, 2013. And after over 3 years, we had to change government. So this new government came in, and one of the agenda of the government was to create 200,000 jobs in the states, with emphasis on agriculture. So the agenda was 200,000 jobs. He got voted in, and he came into power last year. But then the question was, how do you create 200,000 jobs for people within the states with emphasis on the agriculture sector? How do we do that? So having conversations around it became imperative that we can't do this without understanding what the agriculture sector was like. Who were the farmers? What were they doing? Where were they farming? What was the terrain? All we knew at that point in time was Edo State was very positioned for agriculture. We've been known to produce the highest amount of cassava in the states. And we have a population of about 3.6 million people in the whole state. So the questions were, what do we do? How do we understand what's happening there? We realized that we didn't have the existing data of these farmers. All we knew was we had about 40,000 farmers in Edo State, but we didn't know where they were, what they were doing, how they were farming, what the problem really was. But all we knew that this was our economic advantage, and we needed to create jobs for the state. So it came to us at the Open Data team in the ICT agency of the state, and we started thinking, how do we help government do this? We've learned so much. We've realized that we've launched a lot of data sets out there. We've realized the importance of data in driving decision-making for the government. So how do we bring everyone together to start speaking? Or how do we bring them together to tell them that one very good way we can do this was to leverage open data as a way to create jobs for the state? So the very first thing we did was to bring together the different ministries who were going to make this decision. We brought together, and when I say we, were just about 3 of us within that particular team that it was important for us to solve this problem. So we brought together the Ministry of Agriculture, we brought together the State Bureau of Statistics, we brought together the the ICT agency, and very importantly, just like what Al said, we went as far as the communities to bring together the local government leaders, to bring together the chiefs of the different communities, and also to bring together the farmer heads of different communities to sit down together and let us think of how we can all do this together. So at the foundation, what we needed to do was to see how we can map farms and get to know farmers, get to speak to these farmers themselves, that they need to open up their data, tell us what you're doing, tell us what's happening within your farms. How do we communicate to farmers within the state that they should give us access into the farms and release their data to us? That was a major challenge we had in that exercise. And from the slide there, that was Esohe. She had an agribusiness. That's an equipment in Edo State. It's used to make gari. Gari is a cassava flake. We had Madam Anna. She had a very huge farm and refused us access into her farm, or refused to talk to us. And one of the complaints she has was that, oh, enough of the government, enough of these community people. We keep telling them things about what we do. But I don't know what you mean by open data, and I don't know what data can actually do for me. You're not important to me, you know. We're getting pushback like that. And that was Osao. He had this very huge barn. Very beautiful pictures we took at the different communities. But these guys were not willing to talk to us. To them, data doesn't mean anything to them. Open data doesn't mean anything to them. All they realize is that you want to create 200,000 jobs. I don't understand what you mean by data. I don't understand why I should tell you what my farm yields or anything that happens. So for us, the lessons learned at this, or the impact at the end of this, was this. We went to these farms, told them how opening up their data would mean government includes them in the budgetary processes. What opening up their data would mean better access to markets. Opening up their data would mean that they get to receive information that would help them improve their farming processes. Opening up their data would mean investors get to know what they're doing, and they get to, opening them up to the wider environment. So the impact of this for us was this. For the first time in history in the States, we had 5 core ministries sitting down together to understand open data. We had local community heads coming to sit with government to really understand how data can impact their community. And for us, this was one of the most successful projects we've had in a while. And right now, we have people who have access to this data of the farmers, sending them information about farming tips and how they can do better. So that's really awesome. So if you want to know more, please do well to ask more questions.
All right, next up we have 2 speakers, actually, from groups working with Reboot, which is a program that works in a number of different countries, actually. But today we are thrilled to have representation from Ghana, as we're in a local data session. If we didn't have a person from Ghana, that would be a little bit of a problem, I think. So Adam Talsma is going to be introducing his colleague, Isaac Aidu, and they will both be speaking about the work that they're doing in local governments. Isaac is actually from a community government here in Ghana.
Morning, everyone, or afternoon. So I'm going to give a little context quickly, and then I'll hand off to our colleague, my partner, Isaac. So quickly, my name is Adam. I work with Reboots. We're a social impact firm, and we work towards inclusive and accountable governance. And we partner with civil society, with media, as well as with state actors, with government, public sector agencies, to really help them better understand context, really center what they're doing, their programs and services around the people and their true needs, and ultimately achieve impact and do that successfully. So we work across the world. We have a West Africa office, and I manage the team there. One of our programs that we're going to be talking to you today comes by way of the Sub-National Open Government Partnership, if you all are familiar with that. That came, if you're all familiar with OGP and what it's trying to do at the national level, we've been a part of the push to take that to the local government, the sub-national level, to be able to see if that is able to achieve more results. And we have been supporting a number of different sub-national pilot programs within OGP, really exciting sort of period. One of those we're going to be sharing a story from that, and one of those is in Ghana, in Sekandi Takoradi. For people who are familiar, it's the western district of Ghana. And if you're familiar with that, with Ghana's geopolitical sort of recent realities, that area has been undergoing some rapid development around oil and oil exploration, and that has led to sort of increased prices in land and property. But there's been some pushback as far as how well the government has been able to translate that increased revenue into sort of results for the people. So I'm going to introduce quickly the Assistant Development Planning Officer from the Municipal Metropolitan Assembly at the local government level there, Isaac.
Thank you, Adama. Good afternoon. Like you said, my name is Isaac Edu, Assistant Development Planning Officer at Sekandi Takoradi Metropolitan Assembly. Those of us who are familiar with Ghana, we at the local government level, we are made up of 216 districts. And Sekandi Takoradi is the third largest city in Ghana. And I'm going to share with you how we use data to prioritize community needs. At a district level, we are practicing a 4-year development planning cycle, which every 4 years, the National Development Planning Commission issued a guidelines to all the 216 Metropolitan and District Assembly to prepare their development plan for the next 4 years. So we start by taking data from the various institutions made up of department, education, health, agric. We take all their data from these institutions and department. Then we go to the community level to interact with the community, to prioritize their needs. As you can see on the board, it's one of the community interactions that we did. So we go there to interact with them, get to know their felt needs, and prioritize them. And one of a deprived community that we visited through this engagement, that we were able to come out, gather information from the community, process the information from the community, and prepared a plan for them. And through that plan, a benevolent NGO saw how the deprived the community is. The community is very deprived in STMA, lack of water, lack of access, road, education. And through that interactions and the plan that we came out with, from the data that we gathered, we were able to put up a nice school building for the community. So we here in Ghana, we put data into a very good use. We and the community sit together to come out with whatever they need and prioritize for them. And this data, what we get from the field, is shared with the NGOs, all institutions, and through that they are able to, help us to develop our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're so glad to have representatives from governments, because working with governments at all different levels is really important, and understanding everyone's perspective and where they're coming from and who's able to provide resources and who's able to make decisions is really critical. We're going to get, hopefully, Skyping in a colleague from Tanzania towards the end of this. So next up, we're going to speak with Mr. Laurent Gabanta, and he's the chairman of COSCI, which is an organization working in Cote d'Ivoire to work against AIDS and other pandemics. And he will come speak up here at this spot, and then we will translate. Ms. Rhonda will help us translate into English after he is done speaking.
French. Le thème que nous avions à vous développer ce matin, c'est comment l'utilisation des données a permis d'améliorer les stratégies de lutte contre les usagers de drogue. Nous avons choisi ces thèmes parce que nous avions estimé que dans les autres domaines d'intervention, il y a des données. Mais au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, jusqu'en 2014, il n'y a pas de données sur les usagers de drogue. Or, c'est une communauté à part entière, qui n'a même pas de famille, et qu'il ne faille pas laisser pour compte. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'il fallait faire? Il fallait d'abord faire l'analyse situationnelle pour avoir des données. C'est ce que notre organisation a conduit. Mais nous avons été appuyés par l'État de Côte d'Ivoire qui nous a financés pour pouvoir faire cette analyse situationnelle. Et après cette analyse, cette enquête, nous avons pu avoir des données sur les usagers de drogue dans le district d'Abidjan. Nous avions fait 30 sorties, nous avions enquêté 1416 personnes et nous avions sensibilisé 1301 usagers de drogue. Cela nous a permis de référer pour la prise en charge 124. Ces données sont importantes à telle enseigne qu'avant 2014, ils n'étaient pas pris en compte au niveau du plan stratégique de la santé en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc on les ignorait. Et après notre étude, ils ont été pris en compte dans le plan stratégique de santé en Côte d'Ivoire 2016-2020. Ce qui fait que pendant la période 2016-2020, l'État va créer 3 centres de prise en charge des usagers des drogues, pour les prendre en charge, pour les soigner. Pendant ce temps, il y a une ONG de lutte contre la drogue qui fait ce travail sur le terrain, qui va dans les fumoirs pour les soigner, pour leur apporter des soins. Donc les activités, il y a la sensibilisation, il y a les maraudes, c'est-à-dire les visites dans les sites. Ensuite, il y a aussi ce que nous appelons les soins primaires qu'on leur donne. S'ils sont malades, ils ont des plaies, etc., on a les soigner. Maintenant, si ça n'y va pas du tout, on les prend en charge en internant dans un centre d'accueil. Voilà un peu l'utilité des données qu'a apporté sur cette intervention. S'il n'y a pas eu de données, on n'aurait pas pris cette pathologie-là, cette addiction dans les interventions du ministère de la Santé en Côte d'Ivoire, puisqu'il y avait absence de données au départ. Donc, nous avons contribué à avoir les données. Nous avons contribué aussi à ce que l'État les prenne en compte et aussi, nous avons contribué à améliorer leur cadre de vie. Aujourd'hui, ils se sentent bien. Aujourd'hui, vous pouvez les approcher. Aujourd'hui, lorsqu'ils ont un problème, ils nous approchent pour avoir des soins nécessaires. C'est ce que j'ai pu vous dire quant à l'importance de l'utilisation des données dans l'amélioration de la vie des communautés. Parce que nous estimons que c'est une communauté à part entière, même s'ils n'ont pas de parents. Parce que lorsque vous vous trouvez dans cet état-là, tous les parents vous abandonnent. Voilà ce que je voulais vous dire à ce sujet.
Okay, wow, okay. All right, so essentially what his organization did, they worked on getting data for drug users in Côte d'Ivoire. Before 2014, there was no data on this particular group. This group was isolated. So they received the support of the government of Ivory Coast, and they did their work in the district of Abidjan. They located and got data from 1,416 people. 1,300 people received awareness and education, and 124 people were admitted for treatment. Again, before 2014, there was no information on this group. In 2016, there was a health plan that incorporated this particular group, and 3 centers for drug treatment were implemented. So what those drug treatments did was, first they did sensitivity and awareness campaigns. They did site visits as well, and they also provided medication for those who needed treatment and so on and so forth. For anyone who was in a severe case, they were admitted into treatment, they were put on admission in these treatment centers. So the main things that this organization has done is, first, getting data, allowing a policy to be developed that included these people, and the most essential one is it allowed this isolated group to improve their quality of life. Did I get that right? Est-ce qu'il me manque quelque chose? Ou...
Non, ça va, je crois que c'est l'essentiel. Vous avez cité les résultats là.
Donc, j'ai 1416 personnes qui ont été sensibilisées.
Oui.
J'ai 1300 personnes qui ont reçu l'information et l'éducation.
C'est ça.
J'ai 124 personnes qui ont été admises pour traitement. C'est bien ça?
Oui, c'est ça.
OK, parfait, j'ai déjà
Oui,
dit.
voilà.
OK.
Et il faut préciser que cela a été fait au cours de l'année 2016. Cela a été fait au cours de l'année 2016.
C'est dans l'année 2016 qu'il y a eu l'implémentation de la politique. C'est bien ça? Oui,
c'est
c'est
bien
déjà
ça.
dit.
Ok.
J'ai dit qu'il y a 3 centres de traitement.
Qui va être créé.
Pardon?
Qui va être créé.
Oh, okay. So the 3 centers of treatment have not been created yet, but they will be.
Yes.
Est-ce que vous connaissez dans quelle année ça va être implémenté?
Non, d'ici l'année prochaine,
Okay.
2018.
By 2018, these 3 centers will be up and running. C'est bon?
Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
parfait.
this is very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laurent. And thank you, Rhonda, as well. So our final speaker in the room today will be Jumane Ntambalike, and he is the head of Sahara Sparks, and he partners with Data Zetu, which is a program of DCLI in Tanzania, and he will be speaking about their experiences with local data use in communities in Tanzania.
Hello, everyone. It's interesting. I'm speaking Swahili and English, and this is so cool to have all this diversity in Africa. Good afternoon. My name is Juman Nemtambarike. I'm the Director for Capacity at the Data Zetu project, but I'm also the founder of Sahara Ventures. Our role in Data Zetu project is to conduct what we call listening campaign. So we are the component of the project which actually work with the community at the sub-national level. As part of what Data Zetu does, we reach out to community in 3 specific municipalities in Tanzania. One is located in Dar es Salaam called Temeke, and the other 2 they are located in central Tanzania, Mbeya and rural Mbeya, which is called Kyela. So as part of the listening campaign, we conducted more of sessions with people at the subnational level. We talked with over 600 people from across 4 wards. We used more than 320 flip charts, and they voted across over 32 issues that were raised. We call them pain point. Some of the technical terminology that we use in the project. So what are the key learnings that we got from the listening campaign by working with people and have their perception on how they use data? One of the key things is that to them data is nothing. Data makes sense only if it's impacting their life directly. So numbers such as Tanzania has been growing economically by the rate of 7.5% for the past 10 years. It doesn't make sense to them unless the price of ugali, which is a local food, goes down. That's when they start to make sense of data. Issues like the government has pumped in 30 billion to build the national backbone for ICT, which the Minister of ICT has just done it a few years ago, doesn't make sense to them if they are still paying the same rate for communication using their phones. So what we really need to do is try to find a way on how we can link data to the things that matters to them most. And that's the biggest challenge. From the conversation we had with people, we were focusing on 4 thematic areas. So the health sector, economic and development sector. We are also focusing on the general issues that they're facing, but also on the gender and adolescence related issues. And surprisingly, so many things pops up because part of the Data Zetu project is to try to identify pain points that are facing the communities and try to check if the existing data set that can be used to address some of those problems and at least develop tools that can be used to address those problems. Most of the problems that comes out, actually there is no any data set to address those problems because at the basic level, like someone is telling you that, you know what, in our streets, there's a lot of criminals and gangs attacking our houses. So how can data be used to address this? Sometimes says, my kids are staying idle, they don't have jobs, they are joining mobs and gangs, and right now they're consuming drugs. They are moving from weed, and now they consume Valium. How can data be used to address that? So, to them, data is still numbers and figures, which doesn't make sense to them unless they are playing betting games to say Manchester United or Liverpool, which will win. So we need to find a way of transforming this data that we are collecting, this data that we want to make open, to make sense to them. And Aidan from Taweza said something very interesting this morning. Everyone says data is oil, but actually it's a crude oil that needs a lot of refinement until it can make sense and actually impact people at the ground. Openness is just a step, but how do we make data usable at the sub-national level is key. So we'll be having this conversation. Thank you so much.
All right, I hope you are all assembling your questions because we're only going to have one more conversation. We're hoping to page in Ms. Rose Aiko. She's a statistician at the National Bureau of Statistics in Tanzania, and she's worked extensively with the Data Lab in Dar es Salaam and also with members of the public, including a really cool thing, I think, implementing a data request button on their data portal. So you are interested in how many women are in STEM and that data isn't on their data portal, you can request it from Rose directly.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. You can speak now. Okay. Rose? Rose, you're listening. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see some of you, in fact, and I have also recognized some of the people we work with here in Tanzania. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
We can.
Great. So, and thanks to Jumanne, yes, for starting on the conversation about some national data.
Rose, you disappeared for a little bit.
Wait, okay.
And yeah, I'm sorry, Rose, I think it's maybe not working as well as we'd hoped. So I think we may have to catch up with you again after the session, but this is a good entree for me to bring up our speakers to sit with me here on the panel, because we would like to make sure that people will come, if my panelists will come join me up here. I'll start off with a question, and we just passed, and we'll add folks to whatever communication tool we end up deciding to use. If you don't want to participate further, you can. So thank you, everyone. You'll use your mics. One of the things, I work for monitoring in my organization, and right here, ways that often feels like this. I hope communities to ask them to help us work with communities to ensure aren't always the same. I think we're going to have to just have you guys speak loudly because
Framing. If you frame it that you're collecting the data on our behalf, then the question then arises, who are you and why am I giving you my data, and and what is your relevance with regard to my data? And when I give you that data, what are you going to do with it? And how is it eventually going to benefit me that I give you my personal data? On the other hand, if we are a community and we want to get ourselves to be better and we are collecting the data so that we as a community can improve our lives and that we can take control of our own lives, then the discussion is a different one. We don't ever go to a community and try to collect data on our own behalf. We sit with the community and their administrators and say that we want to help them to collect the data if they agree. And if they agree, then they understand that the data will be kept for them by their chief, who is their local administrator. So the data remains entirely under the control of the community, and that the data that is collected is data that they care about. We may sneak in one or two questions that we care about, or that we think they should ask a question about, but ultimately our perception is that if you frame it correctly, then people feel obliged or comfortable to be able to give you the data.
In our case, I would say not just framing correctly to people or to the people you're collecting data from, but you have to speak in languages they can understand, in terms of probably leaving out the conversation of the word data from it and actually practically telling people what releasing information can do for them. So for example, in our case, when we needed information from farmers, we need to know where they are located. We needed the phone numbers of those farmers. We needed their detail up to their sexes, what they do, their educational level. And that is the data we wanted to open up to the public. Yeah. So for them, it was getting too close and too personal for them to release that data to us. But at that point in time, what we started telling them was this: what do you need most as a farmer? Some of them talked to us about the fact that they needed to expand, they needed to access to market, they more profit. And the question is, if you're not opening up your data, if you're not telling people what you're doing, or your information is not available up there for people to know what you're doing, how then do you want to improve your services? How then do you want information? How then do you want farming tips? How do you want those investors to get to you? How do you want government to really know what is happening within? So at some point, you are able to opt fully and you're leaving it within the community. Well, at some point, you need to open up this data as much as putting it online, and it might look like exposing them, but it's for their benefit. So really, you have to find the line of what these people you want to collect information from, what they need, what is important for them, and then help them understand what the benefits are. And really looking at it perspectively, individually, they already collect data. Someone who is counting his yams or who is knowing the place you're having a gathering, but the context is
maybe with 3 responses, which I hope they are really related to the question. The first thing is questions really are related to indicators, and they are indicators which we collect or government collects. So I'll say something that is very significant. How do we work with the local administration, the local leaders in the community, but also the local government administration? Because they have some form of systems, or there are people who have come last week and asked questions, then you show up this week and ask another bunch of questions which are very related. So how can we leverage the work of other organizations, including government, who are working in that area? So that's my first response. Then the second thing also is in terms of translating it to value to this community. And I think the use case which Al shared with us is very important. Can we, instead of, can we co-design? Can we ask this, incorporate these people into the design of the programming that we are doing, so that even as we think about indicators which matter to development partners or to our funders, that they also matter to the community, that we are touching what really is important to them. Yeah.
After Isaac speaks, I will ask for your questions, so please be ready.
For we at the local government level, what we consider first is the community entry techniques, how we enter the community, because that one is very important. And we enter the community through the assembly member and the chiefs. So if we go to the community through these people, because the citizens have already built their trust in the traditional authorities and the assembly members. So if we go to the community through these people, they know that whatever we are doing is genuine. But if you don't go through these people and you go directly to the people, they won't open up to give you the kind of data that you need. So that's how we also look at it from here at the local government level. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really great. So I want to get everyone practiced with hand raising. So I'm going to really quickly ask you guys a couple of questions. Who has ever had their data hacked? Like their data that they gave to a hospital or that they gave to a government? I've had my hospital data hacked multiple times. Who feels like they've had their data that they've given up to a private corporation without really being asked about it? Yeah, who has an Android phone? I love my Android phone. I love Google Maps. But I feel like I really haven't, as much as I probably checked some box to consent to that, I don't feel like I've consented. And how many of you guys, this is getting a little nerdy, just get ready. I mean, how many of you guys have ever done a data project, like you were saying, kept track of those experiences you've, and times when you've also worked with your own communities on data while you're asking questions? So who's got, I would like to take 2 or 3 questions if we could for the whole panel, just to maximize our potential to answer them. Yes, ma'am. Would you turn on your mic?
Thank you very much. My question is about participatory, shall I say, planning, including all the people within the communities. How do you get all of them to speak out? Because I remember, as you mentioned, Secondary Takrady, I worked there for 26 years. And if you go for instance, focus discussion, group discussion, for instance, there was a time you got to know that when you group the men and the women together, you don't get the chance of the women speaking out. And we had a series of problems, for instance, the construction of a borehole in a community where when shall I say, the NGO entered, he just went to the traditional ruler and spoke to the ruler, the traditional ruler and the elders within the community. That time they left the women out. And the chief, for instance, said, we want the borehole to be constructed here. So the borehole was constructed in the center of the community. At the end of the day, they saw that the women were still fetching the water from the stream. They were not fetching the water from the center. So we had to go back to monitor and evaluate why is the borehole just at the center of the community, but you are not using it. There we got to know that they were not part of the planning. And there, in the community, they said, oh, at least when we get up from bed, we are fetching water. Whilst we are going to the stream, we chat, we converse, we release stress. That's why we preferred going to the stream instead of fetching from the well in front of the chief's palace. So this is the situation. We had to, again, sit down with them and then constructed the borehole to where they preferred. And there they started fetching the water from there. So my point is that, and whenever you go for focus group discussion or public hearing, sometimes if you group them together, they don't talk. But what you saw that when you separate the women and the men, there you get the views of the community and get to know their needs assessment. So.
Our first question, if you guys have any comments, people are not address them together. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm speaking in the lens of someone working with a development organization. And you realize that now you've gotten to the point that in partnership with government, you get to have a lot of information sources available. They are already existent. And it's like you keep on replicating, going back to the same communities, asking them for the same information has already been collected, so why should I give it again? So I'm asking this, how do we interrelate these systems, information sources for them to work together, and then how do we feed back to these communities to tell them that this information that we have collected, this is how we are going to use it to improve your lives, so that it becomes easier for them to also give us much more information.
Fantastic. Okay, so those are the, I'm going to call those 3 questions because I think they are 3. How do we make sure that people who are coming to our meetings, if we're hosting them, are actually able to communicate their ideas and get them heard? And then the second and third questions were, how do we reduce people being asked for the same information repeatedly? Are there tools, are there techniques that we can use? How does open data play into that? And also, how does that data feed back to the community so that they know that they're giving you something, but they're getting something in return? And I think Nkechi's talked about that a little bit. Rhonda, could I interrupt you real quick too? I would love if you would ask LeRon just a real quick question about that first question. How does he make sure that especially people who are suffering from diseases are able to communicate and participate in the discussion without additional burdens?
Okay, bonjour Laurent. Donc cette question, c'est pour vous. C'est la première question. On vous demande, lorsque vous faites les entrevues, lorsque vous leur posez des questions, comment vous vous assurez que les gens qui participent à votre étude sont capables de vraiment s'exprimer et dire vraiment ce qu'ils ont besoin, sans avoir de peur qu'il y ait des répercussions, en fait. Donc, c'est la question qu'on vous demande.
Merci, ça c'est une très bonne question. Et il faut savoir que c'est une population assez sensible. Et qu'au départ, avant d'aller faire l'enquête, cette population n'était pas de sécurité. Donc il y avait la peur. Il fallait d'abord les rassurer. Communauté, en tant que tel, les approcher dans l'identification. Ils ont confiance et ils les écoutent. Et ce qu'on ne vient pas mettre à la disposition des forces de sécurité, ils sont méfiants. Lorsqu'ils savent qu'ils ont des petits bobos, c'est-à-dire des plaies, des maladies, on leur donne des soins sur les sites où ils sont, c'est-à-dire sur les sites de consommation, on leur donne des soins. Ils ont fini par prendre confiance en nous et ils nous acceptent. Et pendant l'enquête, c'est eux-mêmes qui organisent leurs collègues qui se tiennent avec nous. Au jour d'aujourd'hui, encore, il faut les mêmes. Ils ont eu les groupes d'auto dans les sites de consommation, et ils font le travail. Voilà, c'est de le faire sortir des médecins. Ensemble, on est associationnel. Surtout pour le VIH, de la santé, là, est de certaines priorités. Et là, pour venir dans
Population, it was a very population had. So what does this organize? They started to took the initiative and started taking a leadership role in recruiting other drug users in around us. They would be trained. They collaborated with each person has a responsibility to this community. Again, before it was oppression, and this group had a lot of fear, but now they trust and they feel as if they belong to the community, which is one of the main goals and how they were able to really get these people to participate more in this program.
Thank you, Rhonda. And I like how that also brought out some of the other themes and the other questions that we had. So you guys have responses. I think Jumane has one.
Yes. I want to talk about the first question my madam put across about the participatory planning and budgeting. How we engage the citizen, putting them together in one group. Most of them will not talk. Yes, it's true. What she's saying is true. So that's what we have been doing for the previous years. And last year when we had Reboot to support us in the co-creation of our open government action plan, the sub-national action plan, they came out with a new model where we group each group. We have the chiefs and elders into one group, the women's group, the youth also, we put them together, and we tested this model in 3 different communities, and we saw that it is very, very effective. The model that we introduced through Reboot worked for us. We see how people were talking, the youth, when we put them into various groups, and we assigned one person to lead and one person for them to record their proceedings. And it worked very well. Everybody participated. And the kind of things that they were bringing out from the communities, you see that if they were together, you see that they will not have spoken about those issues. So groupings is very important, and that's the models that currently we are using in our engagement with our communities. Thank you.
It's very interesting. You might have to learn. So, very interesting question from the madam. I just want to share experience from conducting the listening campaign. So, actually, in the listening campaign that we do under the Data Zetu project, we're using a participatory matrix approach. And what we do is we are grouping the groups into specific 8 groups. So we have elder women, elder men, young female from school, young female out of school, young male from school, young male from out of school, community leaders, and CSO and CBO representative. So those are complete like 8 groups with different perception, different understanding, different experience with the community. And it has been amazing in terms of what we are capturing from them, because let's say the issue of unemployment, if it comes out as a pain point, the perception of the elder women is different from the perception of the young people, and gives you the different way, the way they're thinking, and the diversity of a solution if you're planning to do some sort of an intervention. And even the facilitator, the elder women will want to talk to a woman, young male from school and young male out of school, they want to talk to a young male so that they can open up more. So this also gave us an opportunity to learn about how to choose a facilitator to facilitate the groups. And in terms of making sure they contribute what they want to contribute, we don't control the discussion, we just structure the discussion using the matrix tool. So we just tell them these are semantics area we want to talk about, and you yourself can come up with a problem or pain point that you think they are key to these specific areas. And the way we structure it is that, like, come up with a problem, try to tell us what do you think is a reason of that problem, and if you had to address it, how could you have addressed it? And then our work later on when we are doing the actual analysis is try just to see how data can be used to address that pain point. And we went far ahead. We do something called pain point prioritization, where we allow the community to vote, and then after they vote, using the DIY problem identification toolkit, we are deep diving into the most voted community problems, and then they discuss themselves really and deeply. And then from those discussions is where you can get now a deep root cause of certain issues that are happening to the community. For example, you might think this is the reason they don't do this. But from those deep diving sessions, we came to understand it's a completely different reason. For example, one of the key cases, so that I can save time, is we realized in two of the community in an area called Mbagara Ku, and the other one is called Mbagara, they were complaining that young people are shifting from using, these are urban municipalities, so young people are moving from consuming weeds as drugs, they are moving into using Valium as a new drug in the block. So when you come to trace, you come to realize there's a lot of pharmacies and places where they issue drugs where they are not formally registered, and these guys do a legitimate trade of selling drugs without prescription to these kids to turn them into drug consumers. So you only get this perspective after you split them into groups, because elder men and elder women of the community cannot tell you this, but young men out of school, they know where these drugs are coming from. So they can tell you how to do a proper intervention if you're a public official, or if you're a government guy, or if you're a person from a local government authority. So that is what we do when it comes to distributing the groups in a different group, so that they can give you a different perspective about a certain problem that can be addressed using data. Going back to the question of reputation, which was said by my sister there, we face the same challenge. They say, you're back here again. There was a bunch of groups coming to ask us questions. What is so special about you guys? Why should we open up and tell you issues that are very personal to us? Because for us, we even go deep and ask them personal questions around health issues, HIV issues, and stuff like that. We told them we don't need this data. This data are yours to make your own decision on how you want to intervene or which problem that you want to address. The same discussion we're having with you is the same discussion we're having with the LGA authority. These votes that you're doing, they're going to be analyzed also with them. So it's going to help them with the planning and making strategic decision on how they want to intervene and help you. By you guys opening up, you're helping your LGA leader to know next time he got money from the municipal, should he build a road or should he invest on a hospital? And the only way you can be able to know that is by you guys opening up on what you need more. So we make them own the process, and then they feel it's not a bunch of guys coming to us to collect data, but to actually open up so that we can find a solution for our own community problems. Thank you.
Every time, telling you to open up data about what you do to them because they want to cause change. And honestly speaking, most times, developmental organization, because actually I work with Code for Africa now, so I'm on the other side, on the user part of the whole open data conversation. And I really do understand again, start effort. Most times it's the private own servers. So let that to the public trusted us with their data, and so it's pretty okay.
And thank you very much for coming. I did not expect that so much of you would turn up here. So I'm disappointed that there are so many of you. Seriously, thanks for coming. I honestly did not expect so many people to fill this room. That means that we are in good hands and in good trouble, like I say. Thank you for coming to this session. It's going to be a relaxed afternoon session. The people who are here are not panelists, they are contributors. The panelists are seated this side. So our job is to mine your intellectual capacity to be able to improve this report. I must apologize if you don't have a copy of this report, but anyone can download it online, and
if you need me to attach it as a PDF and send it to you by email, because I promise I will do that. So please forgive me if you don't have a copy, and I will give this one out to someone here because I have my copy hidden somewhere, my personal copy. But we can all download it online. This is the first edition of the African Revolution Foundation. The Web Foundation would like to recognize of Mr. Fe on this on behalf of the open data. I also want to recognize they were looking for UNECA. That is the first logo. And the last logo, which is the longer one, Mr. Sage Captor himself, to arrive. Appreciate the sacrifice you made and you signed up for, and I want to say thank you. These are the organizations that worked around us, but we didn't. There were countries and we had friends. Gave input, and Winnie has been. We want to use the Data Revolution partner. We had a smaller room, but we wanted to reflect on this report. We wanted to get feedback from the immediate partners and from state authorities. So today, we want to hear what your take back was from yesterday. Then we will come to you. Even if you're getting the report at this time, we want to hear from you what will be your own vision of an Africa data revolution. If you would like to speak, because we are being streamed, we would like you to use the mic. That means you point on it. You see the green light, then it comes red. It means you are on. Please use the mic at any time. I'll plead with my contributors to please come up here. If you're tweeting, it's AODC 17 and ADRR. Si vous voulez intervenir en français et qu'il faut qu'on vous traduise en anglais, je me ferai plaisir de vous rendre ce service. Thank you once again for coming. I want to start with Winnie, my own dear Winnie. Winnie, you followed this process. You've fought for it. Sometimes fought people for it, and your heart is in it. Yesterday you came out strong, but we're looking at the work you do as a data journalist. Has this been of any help to you? And what do you want to do going forward as a data journalist in the framework of an Africa data revolution? You've got 2 minutes.
Well, I'm tall. Hi, good people. My name is Winnie Kamau, and I'm a data journalist based in Kenya. We run Association of Freelance Journalists in Kenya, and I'm glad that that Nena invited us during the first meeting for the Africa Data Revolution report when they were forming the team, and that was back in Nairobi. And I remember it was in this hotel, and yes, it was a gorgeous, it's one of those good hotels, and you like the ambience, you like the food and everything. So I knew something good was being cooked out of this report. Well, I really appreciate the work that was done because it's not easy. Just recently, we were doing a research on the media landscape in Kenya with an organization called Reboot, and we had some difficulties and some challenges that we faced. So I would understand, and I appreciate the work that was put in to make sure that this report comes out well and reflects the people who put their effort, or the people who were interviewed, and the case studies that were done. But one downfall I realized as a communicator, as a journalist, it's not user friendly. So if you read it, how many journalists are in the house? Yeah, quite a number. And thank you for coming. And if you read it, you find that it is not user-friendly like you'd think. It's a science report, it's a scientific report, kinda, and it would easily put you off. Normally, they say journalists don't like reading, but it's not true. Journalists like reading, but they like it simplified. And the best they would do is come to such an event, ask for a press release, and ask you to tell them what does the report say. And then they go back to the newsroom and report. But you see, the challenges of the newsroom is that you have little time to work on a story, and you have little time to digest everything. You don't have enough time to read the whole report. So if it's user-friendly and it's in a format that people can access online and read it well online, then that would really work. That is one thing I realized out of this report. And also, I would read into the social media. How are you able to circulate it on social media? How easy is it for the youth, the people who are on their gadgets, to read this report? So those are some of the things that I realized that would be a challenge, but it is something that people can work on and make it better. My 2 minutes are over. Thank you.
But don't go too far. We're going to come back to you. Let's hear from UNDP, because UNDP put in a lot of work at the country level and actually contributed some of the work they are doing around SDG already. So maybe Serge, you want to talk to us about how you're coming and where you want to go.
Thank you, Nina. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Serge Capto. I'm with the Strategic Policy Team in UNDP. And I am in the team that is sort of coordinating the support that we in UNDP provide to countries to help them get started on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, the new agenda for sustainable development that's adopted by the United Nations and all member states. The thing that's different with the SDGs, the 2030 agenda, is that for the first time in global development, data is acknowledged as one issue of development that needs to be addressed by itself. So it's not only about monitoring, but the agenda is specifically calling for improving the capacities of countries to use data better and use data more effectively. Poverty, so that are actually affected, whichever dimension of poverty is affecting them. So that agenda also comes with this principle of leave no one behind, which is a fundamental principle that is now driving the work that we do to help the countries get started. So we felt that in UNDP we had to help advance that agenda and see how we can harness all the energy, the creativity, and the innovation around the data revolution to help advance this agenda. And one thing that we saw very clearly at the beginning was that the agenda was very much linked through data to issues of accountability, which is quite important, empowerment and participation of people, the need to have a voice on what the data says about them, to be able to tell their own story in their own voices. And we did realize that very often in data processes, the investment, it's more oriented towards production of data. So the production side, the supply side of data, and not enough on the demand side, the users of data. And that led us to this approach to understand exactly why that is the case. And so we took a very political outlook to this, to say that data issues are not purely technical, because sometimes the technical capacities are there, but the reasons why some people get counted or services don't access some people are often political and driven by politics of the people involved. So we need to take a little bit of that political lens to data, and that's why we were quite happy to support this exercise, starting with the work that the Economic Commission for Africa and our friend Dozie the data that is produced agenda that is rooted in the rights framework and that actually leaves no one behind. So that's why we were very happy to support this exercise when it started. We're very happy of the partnership that we've had with the Web Foundation, ECA, the Open Data for Development Network to make this happen. I hope that many of you, or all of you, have already taken a look at the report. I have to say that the report is meant to be quite action-oriented in terms of the recommendations that it makes, particularly to the primary stakeholders, the government, but also us as development communities. We have a big role to play in that ecosystem. We have an impact on the data ecosystem that is not to be denied, particularly in countries where there's very little resource. What you see happening is that very often the data that gets collected is the data that gets paid for. Now, who pays for that data collection and why? And sometimes that's the role that we as international agencies plays in the data ecosystem. So in this report, we wanted to tease out all of this interplay between the different stakeholders in data and see how we can have a more coordinated take advantage of synergies better to help advance this agenda, because it's going to be a transformative agenda, which means that we can't continue doing what we're doing for the MDGs, that's for sure. We need to do things differently. Business as usual isn't going to work. And the beauty here is that most of our leaders, including your leaders, political leaders, are all saying the same thing. They're saying that data is important. They're saying that business as usual is no longer the order of the day, and they're asking for innovation and transformative approaches to get this done. So in this report, we have some elements to get started on that conversation. For us in UNDP, we're really taking that to heart, and I'm quite pleased to say here that the recommendations in this report and in the more general assessment that we've done in other countries on data ecosystem is actually now informing the advice that we're providing to countries. So it's not an exercise in the abstract for us. It's something that we are using when we're going to a country. I was in Jamaica, I was in Djibouti. We have some colleagues that are in the Gambia right now, all looking at what a country needs to do to implement the SDGs and the role that data can play in that conversation. We are using these recommendations to see how we can improve the use of data, what sort of capacity we need to provide data users, what sort of new tools we need to develop to address the cross-sectoral nature of the SDGs, where all the goals and targets are now connected to one another. You can't pick and choose which goals or which targets you want to implement. The agenda has to be implemented as a whole, which means that we need to understand the trade-offs between the different sectors. If you're going to invest in tourism, what impact is that going to have on the environment? What data do you have to inform the analysis that you're going to do to make that kind of decision? And that's what we are doing in UNDP. That's why this report is very valuable for us and actually a very useful tool and practical. So I hope that for you, it's going to be practical as well in helping you help us advance this sustainable development agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We were to have Dr. Cosmas Ochieng, who is the lead author, but unfortunately he could not make the trip. But I would like to recognize the presence of Paul Mungai. If you could stand, because Paul is running his PhD on this issue. And when he heard about it, he came by himself. He says, I want in. We're like, okay, Paul, we don't have the budget, we don't have anything. He's like, I want to do it. And he did it. And he did the report for Kenya, and he was not paid for it. There are people who want to contribute, but he did more than contribute. He brought spirit to it, and I want to say thank you, Paul, for all the good work. Hoping to meet Dr. Mungai. We've heard from Winnie, who says the next edition, we need to make it user-friendly. We need to make it media-friendly. And Sage that says this is important and it's even more important going forward. One of the people who read this, who followed through, who is still tracking it, and who will make more use of it is our own Muchiri. Muchiri Muchiri actually works for a think tank. He may look like a simple human being, but it's because he thinks a lot. He thinks through things. Thinking through this report, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Nana. Maybe that's why I'm never putting on any weight. All the energy it takes is just so draining. I think I hear there's a research project going on right now to establish which jollof. But because I'm a small guy and I bruise easy, my skin is delicate, I shall avoid getting into that fray. I'll stay in safe territory. So, as you've heard, my name is Mushiri Nyaga. I'm with the Local Development Research Institute based in Nairobi, Kenya. We work a lot around supporting the efforts of African Union member states in ending hunger, poverty, and reducing inequality on the continent. We also have the distinct honor of being the coordinators of the Africa Open Data Network, which is a new collaborative around open data in Africa. We strongly believe, and he's not here, but I have now appropriated that. It is my quote. You can quote me. We believe in open data in Africa, for Africa by Africans. So this is what we want to see happen here. Open data that's responsive to our development agenda. I looked at the report earlier, and of course I saw the finished report, and it's fantastic. We loved it at the office. We've tweeted it. We've shared it. We had a few thoughts about it. Now, because we tend to look at these documents as a way of trying to convince our colleagues in the public sector to make some changes to how they're doing business, we tended to bring that lens a little bit to how we looked at the document. So there are a couple of things that I really like about this report. One is that sometimes if you come from a tech background, you hear the word data ecosystems, you see a report of this nature, you expect to see a lot of talk about APIs, about IEEE certifications, about GSM, all the usual technology-heavy stuff that can tend to accompany a conversation on data in Africa. And this wasn't it. This is a document that demonstrates how you cannot have a conversation about data in isolation. That when you start talking about data, you will end up having to talk about legal and policy frameworks. You'll have to have a conversation about human capital. You'll have to have a conversation about institutional capacity. You'll have to have a conversation about financial resource allocation. These are things that come with it. And that's driven because we are thinking about data not in isolation, but because data is a means of implementation. We're trying to get something done, and data is helping us get our job done. So that was extremely good to see in this report. And the other element that was important for us to see here was the recommendations around investing in the capacity of government institutions on administrative data. This is a very big area of work that we need to do around the continent. Building our civil registration and vital statistics systems so that we cover 100%. We know we have all the births registered, all the marriages registered, all the deaths registered. This is critical information for development, and we need to do a better job at it. And so it was very good to see the focus on administrative data coming through in this report. Just looking forward and thinking about how would the next report be extremely valuable for those of us who want to put it in the hands of someone in government, so that it can be useful in their work, in making sure that we're making progress, that we're creating an opportunity for data to help us get our jobs done. One of the things that we think would be fantastic, and this is aspirational, is that I'd love to see an Africa Data Revolution report for every single country on the continent. That would be, I think, extremely useful. And that's in the spirit of leave no one behind. We want to reduce inequalities within and among countries. So that's I think, aspirationally. Of course, there are resource considerations. So the amount of support you can raise for the next edition, may constrain that to a few countries to start with. The second thing I think is we need to, when this came up yesterday in our meeting, is to bring greater government ownership to this, so that it doesn't look like an external document that is being done by a small group of donors and UN system organizations and then being shopped around governments. The truth is, in practice, that governments were actually quite involved
in the production of this report. The national statistics offices of the countries that were part of this were engaged. They were formally present in the process. But this, I think, speaks to a bit of what also Winnie talked about, which is the communications aspect. So the next edition of the report will probably see a little bit more of other Pan-African ECA is there, but other Pan-African institutions, whether it's the regional economic communities like ECOWAS, CSE, SADC, and the likes, or whether it is the African Union present. And that's because, to a certain extent, those institutions provide the kind of backing that someone in government might need in order to put that document in front of their bosses and say, we need to do this. Especially where you're pushing your government to make changes when it comes to investments in administrative data. Why? Because this has been looked at, it's been studied, and this is where we currently are, and according to the recommendations on this report, that's what we need to do. So my 2 minutes are almost over. So because I bruise easy, like I said, I shall stop there, and I shall hand over to Nenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mushiri. For the countries that were understudied this is not a compilation of country reports. It is a continental report that inspired from a number of countries. But I did remember that one of the challenges we had was that we said, let's give it all the time it needs, but we need to contact the national statistics offices of each of these countries. So for us to, I think some of the letters were written through their ministries of foreign affairs. There were physical letters written and carried and brought down to the country. That took a lot of time, but we said it was very important because, of course, one of the recommendations is that the statistics office is the home base of data in every country. We're supposed to have someone from the Ghana Stats on this panel. I'm still expecting him to arrive. I think we had some miscommunication at the beginning, but I'll be very happy to hear from anyone from the statistical service of any of these countries. But please do know that we actually, and in some gentleman has Africa Data Revolution Conference, the high-level conference on data revolution in Africa, what was called the Africa Data Consensus, that actually said we needed to have a report. And I recall at that time, we were asking how would the report look like, what would be in need. But here it is now, we have a report. I want to say congratulations for pushing it. I know it was a very difficult thing, and you did things you should not do, and you did more than you should do to have this report. So congratulations, and we want to hear from you. Blessed. But for the next edition, what is your vision concerning the next edition? You're not just speaking for ECA, you're also speaking for yourself. You're welcome, sir. 2 minutes, 10 seconds.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody have a report, if there's anything like that. You report these days. It's a panel that the SG set up to advise him on what you so the revolution. And we in can produce a coin the word followed, they should be able to be part of this revolution. And we call it the Africa Data Consensus. And one of the things that the Africa Data Consensus says is that data produced with public funds should be open by default. We took that from the Web Foundation. That's what because they were part of the panels that came to that thing. we then made it part of the consensus that everybody did. We also have, I think there are about 19 principles in that document, Africa Data. You can Google on the internet, Africa Agenda on its own. And that's what we say, let's have a report, an ongoing report. This is not, okay, these are just numbers, but
In Washington, and we would like to have the Africa Data Revolution report. Please, we need it because it will form the basis of the work we want to do. So once again, congratulations, Africa. We're not copying from anyone. We are exporting our own. I want to pause here and listen to the panelists, contributors. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, but we need to listen to you. If you could raise your hand, so I see, and then we recognize you. Une fois de plus, s'il y a une intervention en français, nous allons faire la facilitation en anglais. Okay. We have a gentleman here, a lady there, a gentleman, another gentleman. So let's take this 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we'll come back. Yes, sir.
Hello. Yes, my name is Kizito Kujo. I'm a business journalist. I think a lot of the talk around open data has been about empowering the citizens to hold their governments accountable and transparent. And one of the key intermediaries to help to bring this or make this a reality is the media, the journalist. My worry is, how is these data being championed? How media friendly are these data? In order that when they are produced, we the journalists could also dissect whatever has been captured in there and then communicate it to the citizenry. A lot of the time, we get these data and we partly report on the data. It isn't because we are lazy. It is because a lot of the time, these technical men pour their technical ideas on paper and present it to us and expect us to be able to interpret it. So how media-friendly are these data sets being presented? Thank you.
Yes. All right. My name is Elizabeth Ayamaga, and then I work with the Open Center Africa. My first is the contribution. I want to agree with Winnie that the document is bulky. So I'll suggest that probably next time, in addition to this document, probably you could have an abbreviation. And then secondly is a question. I want to find out the kind of consultations that went on into developing these documents. I know you mentioned the statistical service of the various countries supporting, but then were there any broader consultations to involve inputs from different stakeholders? And then lastly, I don't have a copy of the documents, but then if you can share it on your Facebook wall, I think I can have it. Just download it. Thank you.
My name is Mogire Oboya from Kenya. I'm very keen on this because I'm doing my PhD on this open data. I want to say that this is the third revolution, open data, and I'm happy that it is coming from Africa. And the landscape is changing. For example, in 2013, Kenya was ranked number 23 in the whole world. In 2015, it is number 42. That tells you that things are changing. I realize that a number of countries are joining this bandwagon of data revolution, data initiatives, without proper policies in place. And the policy is very key to open data. I find it a mockery that, but I'm happy that this report is coming from Africa, and for Africa, as Mushiri said, that we are seeing a number of Western data organizations that are championing for this. For example, we have the CODATA that is trying to champion the Africa Open Science Platform, and yet Africans are here. There was a conference in the US last year, November. We did present a paper which has been published in the Data Science Channel concerning open data for sustainable development. I don't know what we are doing as Africans to be able to standardize policies. Why are we reinventing the wheel? A number of countries have already done this. And I can tell you for sure that most countries don't have open data policies. Why don't we standardize this? Because this is the third revolution. And I see this, and as many speakers have said, that this is the new oil for Africa that will power the world to address a lot of societal challenges, political challenges, economical challenges, environmental challenges, and this is the way to go. Let us standardize this so that we don't have to start from scratch. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll come to you and we'll come to Dorothy. If you've not heard of the International Open Data Charter, please, you can Google that, but I'm happy to speak to anyone about the principles of the charter. Yes, sir.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Confidence Samayu from Nigeria. We're talking about open data. I'm trying to chip in or maybe make just very small suggestion here that when we're talking about data, we should be very careful that we should need to look at this data we're talking about. Are they really changing lives of the Africans we're talking about? What are the impacts they're going to create in the community so that it's not just gather data at the end of the day, they are not making any impact? And then what issues that are we really solving? Is it health issues that we're solving, educational issues or agricultural issues? So that we don't just start telling our government open data. Even when the government at the end of the day put the data, maybe your budget on the internet, was it actually participatory? Did you find out from the people what their needs are, what they desire, and then even at the time of executing that same data or analyzing the data, trying to make it work, how many of the community people were carried along? So that we should be very careful when we talk about this open data. Then I will appeal to that the handbook you people shared, it didn't get to some of us. I would like to have it so that we can read it very well and let it get to our smaller communities too. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for a report which will stimulate a lot of thinking and get people galvanized around this issue. I think that for the next report, what I would like to see is some kind of quick survey involving communities of different types, but communities which generally don't get into this space, to find out what they see as their data needs, what they would be interested in, so that they can actually be part of the conversation. Because right now, you know, we say, okay, we are doing a survey, and when we are very good and saintly, we take back the information to the community. But was that really what they were interested in? So if we could have a part of the report that would focus on this. And then the thing about reports is they're always tables. We love tables. So I was thinking of some of the indicators that I would look at to find out if a data ecosystem is actually being transformed in a particular country. Because if we put out some of those indicators, it could get people to start thinking. How many journalists were trained in data journalism in your country in the past 12 months? What have I put down here? How many new businesses are based around the open data that you've put out there? You know, things that get people thinking about the transformation that needs to be happening. The thing which I find missing here, and which as a former Ghanaian government official, I've had a lot of contact with, is the administrative data and record keeping. What you should know is every single government institution prepares detailed reports which go to our presidency with lots of information about how we did implementation, etc. The people, the parts of government that are supposed to generate the statistics for this are poorly resourced, poorly trained, and not keeping up with the trends. So I think it will be interesting. It's not the statistical service, but it is in Ghana the research and information group, which links into the public records and administration department. These are the areas where we get a lot of information, you know, because all the projects that are being implemented, you have to track how many people did they reach, what's happening. And that is where the democracy is, because that's the other part of the budget. You have the budget, government was supposed to implement programs linked with that budget. What impact did that actually have on the ground? So I think it will be interesting to look at that group of people.
We'll come back to you, Madam Sirs, after a second round to hear. Please speak up. Someone was asking about the easy reading in the next edition. By the time we take I have one.
And I saw that principle number 1 was talking about the need to disaggregate data by the ETN, etc. I just wanted to data and social protection for African countries.
More about the statistical institutions, official statistics. And what we've been talking about over the past week is that there are various data which are across board. Here thinking business communities, you know, you have business associations. We need to also rope in whether it's the commerce association, private sector organizations. Also, when we rope them in, I'm trying to see where the gentleman from the UNDP was talking about collaboratives. So probably we can do an assessment after a year and see how institutions were able to collaborate and also share openly their data so that others can access it, so that we can actually see the progress we've made out of the efforts we have here. All right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Belinda Ayamga. I work with the Ghana News Agency. I have 2 comments. First, on the media end. Yesterday, in the session on challenges and benefits and the way forward for open data in Africa, one of the issues that came up as a major challenge for acceleration of the data revolution in Africa was the fact that we don't see a lot of impact stories of data solutions. And so I'd like to ask, going forward, how do we ensure that we have a lot more visibility of such impact stories? And then also the gentleman from UNDP mentioned the fact that there is a lot more investment in the production and demand side of data than on the user end. How do we address that? Thank you.
Hello. Okay. My name is Enestama. I work with Odikro, and I've got a couple of comments. I've glanced through the report, and my first observation is that there was no story on Ghana. Yes, and I wanted to find out why. And secondly, I also noticed a
a couple of human interest stories from Kenya and South Africa, and also observed that you were looking at centralized national data. And I was wondering if you were able to verify the accuracy of the data that we're getting from these national centers, because in Ghana, for instance, there are serious data infrastructure deficit at the district level, the local government level, and you can imagine the quality of the data that will be coming from the local government level to the national database. It will be fraught with errors, clearly. So how were you able to make sure that the data that you were getting from the National Statistical Services were accurate? Thank you.
Those that you should start, data integrity, country selections. I think we should tell a story in the next edition. Once upon a time, Odekore in Ghana. Ah, I hear you.
Okay, let me start. These are very useful comments and questions, and I don't know if I'll be able to answer all of them, but luckily I have other colleagues who will help me answering them. Let me start from the first point about accountability. I've been working in the data field for a long time. I started in geoinformation, then moved to knowledge management, then ended up in data technology in statistics division. I'm not a statistician, but I just happen to sit inside the office. My experience from all these years, when you try to sell open data or anything to the government, don't focus too much on accountability. They will shoot you down. We know that. I mean, there's some of things we don't want to say, but some governments, if you want to tell them you want them to be accountable, they will shoot you down. Instead, focus on making data available so that people will be takers rather than waiting for you to bring things to them. So they will make information available to them to take the services, they will be service takers, that it will be more efficient for them if citizens are service takers rather than wait for you to deliver to them. Focus that aspect of involving them in making decisions and implementing. And by the way, it will include that accountability, but don't put that front and center. That's what somebody was talking about. That's what the West wants you to focus. But that's not our objective. It's our objective, but if you put it up front, you won't get your funding anymore. So that's my advice from many years of experience in this field. That's one. The other point about not reinventing the wheel and whether we've asked the people what they want, we came close to that when we did the high-level conference on data revolution, where we had an open way of data communities forming. And like somebody said, we have to be proud in Africa, we're exporting. Some of the things that people are using now to describe the data revolution, SDG and things, came from that high-level conference. We may be criticized for not having a lot of intellectual properties registered, which is true. We should encourage young people to register their intellectual property and patent. But there's something about African culture that we have to note. We don't want to claim everything. Sometimes when you do something, you give it out to the community. I remember in my language, if you come up with something and you want to say, oh, this is very good, you say, the person whose name eluded me has said it. You don't want to claim that. It's our culture. So a lot of things that they are using to describe data revolution came from that high-level conference. We didn't record it or patent it, but we are happy that it's solving problems in the world. So about that, one of the things that I emphasize when I talk to people elsewhere about this, and I said, yes, we want data by Africans for Africans, but we're not excluding other people. All we want is to be involved in making that decision, because when they sit around and there's nobody from here, they don't take our conditions into account when they make decisions. For example, people who came from America or Europe to this meeting will be so frustrated with the internet service here. And yet when they sit down to make decisions, they make decisions based on the internet service they have there. That's why we need to be at meetings where these decisions are being made, to make sure that our practical circumstances are considered in making decisions. And I have an example that some of you may laugh at it, but I have a good example that I used somewhere, and they laughed at me, but they finally realized what I was saying. I said, I am a Christian. I was born and raised a Catholic. If I studied architecture, no matter how many degrees in architecture I have, I cannot design a mosque. No matter how many PhDs you give me in architecture, I cannot design a mosque, because I have to be in a mosque to know what happens in a mosque to be able to design a mosque. And that's the thing about development, that yes, people out there, they have good intentions, but if they've not lived in Africa, they will not understand why that woman is sitting on a piece of stone, putting tomatoes on the ground, and people are going to buy from her, so going to buy from the supermarket. That's why we need to be there. And that's the point. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but we need to make sure that the things that I've been in a meeting where they described a metadata system that will go out at night and harvest data, which means everybody has to leave their computer on at night. Also in days of dial-up networking. No researcher in Africa could leave their computer on all night. And it was a good thing that I was there at that meeting, but they were going to make that decision as the global standard for everybody. But I happened to be there saying, no, sir, it won't work in my view. I had to go back home and write the offline editor for Africa at that time. That was way back then when I was still young and programming. But that is why we need to be at those meetings. And use my example. No matter how many PhDs you give me in architecture, I cannot design a mosque. Neither can a Muslim design a church. And that's why we need to be in these meetings where these things are being decided. But like I said, I'm not going to try to respond to all the questions. I just want to make final comment that touch on some of them and let my colleagues try to respond. Thank you.
Oh, yes, very true. Contextualization. And thanks a lot for those who've been able to ask questions. And how do we localize this? How do we allow that that the reports that we come out with, or what we are talking about open data, how do we make it operational for all of us? And I realize in this crowd there are many youth, yeah? So how do we, and I like the way you said that, can you put it on your Facebook wall? Then I can pick it up from there. That's how far the youth are. They are ready. They are ready to be engaged. The youth want this thing. And they are the coders. They are the developers. They are the guys who are coming up with apps. They are the guys who are coming up with interesting stories. They are the guys who are going to do data stories, use those figures that the local guy, or you called her the mamamboga. In Swahili, we call her mamamboga. That is the woman who sells vegetables on the streets. So how are you able to interact with them? And that comes to, again, to open data. For how do we engage communicators? How do we engage communicators and journalists? It's by allowing them to come for such events, and for them not to ask them to do stories, for them to come to such events, but to allow them to learn. Because from there they will develop an interest. From there they will be able to tell those success stories that you are talking about. And not only the success stories that will be written on the report, but the success stories that will be covered on daily news stories, in daily papers. So that one day I'll come and say, Odekro, can I be able to do a story on you and how you engage in the parliament in Ghana? I saw you have an interesting project. Can I be able to do this story? Can I follow you when you're maybe pitching or talking to parliamentarians? That's the way we can be able to give or encourage the journalists to have interest, and so that we can have as many success stories being told by our own African journalists, not people from outside coming and telling our stories. Like, I know Alkags has left. Alkags is doing, and I'll say his story. Alkags is working with a chief in Kenya, in a place called Nakuru. He's called the Tweeting Chief. And I don't know if Chief Karaoke, and I don't know if you've heard about him. Everybody, yeah, everybody loves this. But how many stories have been told about Chief Karaoke? How many stories have been told about Al-Kag's project? Al-Kag's has, during that time when they were, yeah, you see, that's an international organization coming to talk about our own stories. It's for us to take up that and be able to tell these stories. And then there's a time he did some project on water. They got data from the tweeting chief, Chief Karaoke, and then they realized, actually, there's some donors who came in. You know the way donors come in and they say, hey, I want to come up with a project. I want to give you shoes for your kids. I want to give you this. And then they were like, no. The problem in this community is not shoes. The problem in this community is not more schools. The problem in this community is that we have fluoride water. There's a lot of fluoride in our water. So they came up with, they went back home in US, came back and brought in buckets, filters, which filter waters. Yeah, they're called that, yeah? And they were able to give a solution to that community, which was not looking for shoes or more schools, but was just looking for a simple thing, to filter the water. And that's how we are able to tell our stories. But last and not least, let's remember, our culture is oral. How do we engage with the radio stations and the TV stations? We don't know our history which is written, but we know our history because we were told, it was passed on by our grandparents and our great-grandparents and our mothers and our uncles. We listen to them. We hold them in high esteem. So how do we tap into such information? And then the last one now, before I'm chased. So how do you say open data in your local language? So before you leave, you can give Nena a piece of paper where you've written open data in your local language, so that we localize it to the local level, that when is it Joy FM or City FM, when they're reaching out to the people in maybe Kumasi or Tokaradi or somebody in the eastern part, they're able to understand when you say open data, revolution is what, yeah? So that's how we can be able to localize it. Thank you very much.
Please, when you get the equivalent of open data in your language, can you please give it to Winnie herself? But there is a Kikuyu man. Maybe he will tell us what it means in his language. Google doesn't have that one.
Google cannot help you with that one. It's funny, the Kikuyu community is stereotypically associated with money. So our concept of data should be very strong. But I think we have, I am still struggling to find out what that is. So if there's another Kikuyu in the house, and you know what open data is. No, data. First of all, let's start with data. Just give me data. I think I'll work on the rest. I'll work something out. That's the thing, that even yesterday at the workshop, we did that. Winnie's group, did that, and they put out sticky notes with all the different languages, and that was the predominant direction, the translations. When we don't talk about data, we actually talk about information, talk about making it available, making it open. I think that the French translation was also pretty interesting, because literally in French it's about the givens, the things that have been donated, the donné. We don't think about it as, in terms of discrete, the way in English you think about data. And I think that has an impact on how we conceptualize our work around open data. If this doesn't have a word in our local language, it means chances are we didn't grow up, with that concept of data in the sense that we do. Anyway, so I love that, and it's a good research project. It shall be done. Fernando, are you writing this down? Very good. Very good. So I'd just like to react to a couple of things. One, my colleague from Kenya, two things you said which is absolutely true. we have core data, fantastic community, doing a lot of very useful work around science and science data around the world. Has a fairly strong presence on the continent, a lot of people working on it. I know someone who's in this conference who's part of the East African Agriculture Data Working Group that, they championed CALRO, the Kenya Agriculture, that one. Sorry, you changed the acronym. I struggle remembering. A research organization. Thank you. There's a lot of great work that CoreData has done. But the thing is, sometimes we see a good thing and we may not, like those you're saying, we should be in the room. What I like about what happens with CoreData, and this is something that we are tracking, is the people who are actually working on Africa Open Science Platform isn't CoreData themselves. It's it's an Academy of Sciences of Southern Africa, or South Africa actually. That's running ASAF, and that's what I like about that. It's ASAF. They understand us. They understand the continent. They are us. So the thing to do is collaborate with them to understand how to scale up that work, so that whatever it is that was conceptualized there is done the way we would like it done to address the things that we are working on from our context. So I talk about the need to make sure that open data addresses our development priorities. What is it that Africans wake up, lose sleep over? That's what we should be thinking about when it comes to open data. So even on legislative openness, our concept around that might look very different from the US. And I have just one example about technology and appropriating technology and the impact on open data, especially around that, as Nena stretches her legs. UNDESA supported a format, a technical format called a Komantoso, XML, blah, 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 etc., etc. Implementation of that didn't happen in Africa to the extent that I think UNDESA thought. Why? Because our parliaments, first of all, don't operate on computers like that. But a Komantoso in the US, and that's one of the reasons I see from weather, but you're right. But the thing is, the technology, the literacy, to even think about digitizing parliamentary proceedings, there's no political will to do it. There's no interest to do it. And Dorothy has a very good idea of the other open source issues that were behind this. And you see, the procurement of open source already is a headache. So those are the things that we need to think about on contextualization. You don't just pick and copy and paste. We need to take into consideration what our context is. So just one more thing, as although I have so many, I just say just one. Policy, copy and paste. The International Open Data Charter. That's a good place for countries to start, because it does give you a frame of exactly what it is that you call open data. Either the only ones, or in a very short list of African countries. A bit easier information being implemented. Someone who can be called and asked whether they're perfect or not, but there are lessons there that, yes, so I think.
Sage will give you the last word. They've come to tell us that we have 3 minutes more. So if you could take 2.
Big mistake to give me the last words and only 3 minutes. I think there were a lot of interesting points, and actually it's quite dear to my heart that Mushiri mentioned Akumantoso, because I was working on that in a previous life. And I have to say that it's that Africa is reinventing the wheel. And maybe we'll adopt Akumantoso as a standard for the UN documents. So those are inventions that came from Africa and that are spreading over the world. And there are many more examples. I don't know if does anyone here know what SHASA is? Here, no. SHASA is the Strategy for Harmonization of Statistics in Africa. So it's a normative document adopted by the African Union, and it defines how all African countries would strengthen their statistical system in a standardized manner in all areas of socio-economic development. And out of SHASA, there's called something that is called the GPS modules of SHASA, which is governance, peace, and security. It's an issue, it's a set of issues that are very difficult to measure, or were thought very difficult to measure. Africa was the first continent, the first region to find a way to measure governance, peace, and security. Africa developed that module for SHASA, the SHASA framework, and that module was used in the international negotiations in New York on the SDGs to actually make the case that governance has to be part of the development framework because there are ways to measure it. People who didn't want that said there's no way to measure governance and peace. Africans were able to say, we did it, we can measure it. It's an essential part of Agenda 2063, and we want it to be part of the SDG framework. And now it is. And at the global level, there is a process at the Statistical Commission in New York to use the governance, peace, and security module developed by Africans as a worldwide standard for monitoring governance, peace, and security. These are achievements of Africa. Africa has been taking the lead on many of these issues. The data revolution didn't start somewhere else. It started here. And I think that you have to tell the stories. I mean, our journalist friends that are here, I think these are a lot of stories that are not told enough, and I think should be told much more. That the work on statistics, on data in Africa, there's been amazing things that have been happening that we've been tracking and supporting from within the UN system, and we're happy to continue support. Now, there is the point on how to bring more resources towards the user sites, which I want to address. And I think it's the same answer to that question. We need to be telling these stories more. And I think we hope that this report is making the case that as we invest in producing more data, we need to invest also in using more data. So we need to start by knowing what are the capacity needs of those that are using data or those that have to use data to actually effect this transformation that we seek on the continent. We actually don't know. And this report is saying we need to know. We need to find out. We need to talk to them, exactly the point that Dorothy made. We need to talk to them and find out exactly what do they need and how can we support those capacities. The more this kind of messaging gets out, the more the donor community is going to be interested in supporting funding towards strengthening data use. Now, last question, and a fantastic question on how that actually makes a difference on the ground. I would argue that it does, even though the causal chain might be difficult to demonstrate, but there is a lot of work that derives directly from these data revolution issues. In UNDP, we're doing something that we called some work on more qualitative data, right? It's not hardcore data. It's data that is told by people, stories that they tell about themselves. And we just had an issue brief working with IDS, University of Sussex, which we call the Real Data Revolution, which is about giving voices to people, turning that voice into information, their own stories into information, and bringing that back to policymakers. Here in Ghana, we have a project with I think it's in the Songo community, salt-winning women, which are losing their livelihoods because of big business interests coming into their areas and having all the local chiefs in their pockets, and the women are being pushed out. So they are working to tell their own stories, working with community radios so that they can bring their voices and their concerns back to the policymakers to try to change the situation. This is what we call the real data revolution. This is happening on the ground, having people, citizens, being able to tell their stories in their own words and hold governments to account. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sage is here all evening. Muchuri is here. The journalist does not like to be interviewed, so I won't put her up, but Dozier is here. Paul, if they can see your hand, Paul was one of the authors, and Fernando is also here. If anyone would like to do a one-on-one with any of these people, they are available for you. I'm also available in French and English to speak to any of the topics. Nobody talked about the women issue, so I want to bring it back. You've praised yourself about how you're the father of the data revolution. Can we also be fathers and mothers of equity and equality in data? God bless you.